Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen McGrath, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hi, everyone.
Now, by all accounts, day one of the spring conference got off to a flying start. Great city location, great and prestigious venue, the well-known Met Hotel in Leeds city centre, as well as a cast of guests, speakers and delegates that combined to make this major networking event. So, Dennis, let's go. You covered the entirety of the plenary sessions. What's your take?
Well, it's very difficult to choose, Helen, but yes, indeed, it was a truly enjoyable day, and I caught up with colleagues, both old and new, during the breaks throughout the day, even sharing anecdotes with friends at my last authority, Gateshead Council. Now, the plenary sessions were all topical and on point, and there were so many of the sessions, as I say, that I could choose to comment upon any one of them. So selecting which ones to comment in detail on here has been really difficult, but here we go. Well, Helen, I must begin at the start of the conference. Our president, Anika Munir Sawar, set the tone with a warm welcome to guests, speakers, exhibitors, and delegates. She said she was truly honoured and proud to be president and spoke about her personal journey that had led her to the role. She spoke with passion and motivation about her background and family and how she began her career in the law. There's no doubt that Anika will want to influence things during her year, mentioning the importance of developing the monitoring officer's role further and also ensuring that the rule of law is sustained. More on this in a moment. Anika also mentioned that she was keen to support the interests of grassroots members during her presidential year. And, like previous presidents, she expressed concerns at the lack of recognition for local government lawyers and the roles that they have within their authorities. And she concluded by saying that she wants to encourage others by her own example, and everyone can see that she is very determined to do this in her role as president this year. Now, Anika mentioned the post office scandal and how this demonstrates how ethical conflicts can arise and the huge consequences that can follow. She mentioned this in the context of the new code of practice for monitoring officers, which is to be launched at the conference, and she emphasised how governance is also about culture and that it is everybody's business in a local authority. And she concluded by saying that she wants to see grassroots engagement locally for LLG members, good governance for everyone, and inclusivity without exceptions. So those were her key messages to the conference. Now, her guest conference speaker was Councillor Abigail Katung, Lord Mayor of Leeds. Helen, what can I say except wow? Abigail began by explaining that she was Leeds' first African mayor, and she chose as her theme multiculturalism and addressing inequalities and deprivation in the city. The phrase that she used that resonates even now is this. She said, diversity is a fact, inclusion is a choice. We need more diversity in politics, she said. And she gave examples of issues during COVID that affected people who did not have access to the internet and to other services and facilities of local authorities during the pandemic. This disproportionately affected poor people and people from ethnic backgrounds in particular. But Abigail spoke with energy and vitality about these issues and had plenty to say about how these issues should be addressed in future by anyone in local government. She left us no doubt about what she plans to do as Leeds City Mayor. Helen.
Well, she was very impressive, Dennis, and combined, Anika and Abigail really set the tone of the event. Now, I'm just going to fast forward here, Dennis, to the last session of the day where you and Justin Griggs from the National Association of Local Councils discussed what the landscape might include now we're heading for a general election. No mean feat, of course, considering at the time no manifestos had been published. So Justin spoke quite a bit about ethical standards, modernising the local government landscape, and of course those remote hearings. Now, interestingly, the MJ's last edition ran with a front page around senior LGA figures, expecting the organisation's long-standing reluctance to beefing up the standards regime to shift after the election. I suspect this rather depends on who gets in power, but unsubstantiated reports suggest that the LGA might be minded to accept it has been too, quote, vanilla in the past on this subject. So certainly at LLG, we have consistently made the point that the lack of meaningful sanctions ties the MO's hands and effectively undermines the position. That's why the work we've been doing with SIPFA and Solace on the Golden Triangle has been so crucially important. And you've got news about that, Dennis.
Well, indeed, I have, Helen. The LLG Leads Conference was the platform for the major launch of the Code of Practice on Good Governance. It's the results of extensive collaboration from all the key players, LLG, Solace, and SIPFA. This is a must-have for all monitoring officers and governance specialists, providing in a single reference point all that practitioners need on both key principles and best practice. So here's a summary of the discussion at the conference. The Code of Practice on Good Governance, developed jointly by LLG, Solace and SIPFA for statutory officers, represents a huge step forwards in defining the roles and responsibilities of those working within the Golden Triangle. This session offered an overview of the best practice principles for positive working arrangements within your local authority, with commentary from the professional bodies involved. Durham County Council Director of Legal Services and LLG Director Helen Bradley chaired this panel, which included representatives from both SIPFA and Solace, and of course it was led by governance guru Philip McCourt. Philip began by explaining the purpose of the Code of Practice. He said the new code is a major collaborative piece of work produced by key representative organisations, and it addresses the question, how does the family of representative organisations explain to each other the key roles in the Golden Triangle? Philip first put things into context, describing the historic background of the role of council officers as servants of the public, individual liability that can arise where you step outside of recognised boundaries. He said it was deliberately decided to call this code the Statutory Officers Code, quite simply because these are the key advisors. All of them have responsibilities in relation to governance, but only the Chief Finance Officer and the Monitoring Officer have legal duties to report in certain situations. He went on to say that financial robustness is at the heart of the Chief Financial Officer's role, but the Monitoring Officer's role is broader and more wide-ranging, and that is why the duties are separated out, and councillors need to understand this separation out of responsibilities. Philip mentioned that the code had been the subject of extensive review and consultation by key commentators, all of whom have contributed to the code, and it is very much an informed piece of work. And here's another question. What precisely is the essence of these statutory roles? Well, Philip is clear on this, and he says that the essential ingredient is that they must all speak truth to power, as well as making things happen, and to remove barriers to prevent things from happening. Helen introduced Andrew Burns of SIPFA. In answering the question of whether the new code of practice strengthened things, Andrew was able to say that it certainly brings greater clarity and understanding, and that must be a good thing. And Graham MacDonald of Solace said the code reflects the context of current working environments, but we should look for opportunities to change legislation following the election and to improve roles, but said the code is definitely a good start. And both thought that the code reflects accurately current working arrangements in local authorities and also reflects good practice about how things ought to be run within the Golden Triangle. Helen.
Well, look, we're immensely proud of it, Dennis, and it's a really important first step. It's really, really useful. I would definitely urge lawyers, whatever level they are within their local authority, to read it and digest it. It's really quite informative, but we see it very much as a first step because, of course, without sanctions, without the government pushing through on the commitment to give further statutory protections for monitoring officers, we're not going to be able to achieve what we want to do. So we're going to continue with those campaigns, but a great code and a brilliant first step for the Golden Triangle. Now, another session which took place at the conference was one from Paul Bowden, who's a partner at Wilkin Chapman. And this was on generating income from debt recovery. And it was really practical and innovative. So anybody who's looking at this issue within their local authority would do well to listen to this session if they haven't, because there's some sort of interesting points in there that authorities might not have talked about. He walked us through the main tools available to local authorities, which I'm sure most people will be aware: charging orders and orders for sale, bankruptcies and winding up action, deceased estate insolvency orders, county court claims, action taken as an insolvency practitioner, and reacting to debtor-driven insolvency. And he was very much of the view that if you don't ask, you don't get. And he advised to make full use of the statutory powers, because not all councils do that. And here he talks about the Council Tax Administration and Enforcement Regulations 1992, attachments, payments arrangements, enforcement agents, committal, charging orders, insolvency. And also, Paul talked about the really tough collections environment in which we're operating. We've got the cost of living crisis, interest rates, there's huge pressures on council income streams, and there's this disconnect as well between cost and value for money from citizens. So basically everybody needs all the help they can get. Now, what was interesting, believe it or not, was that the majority of people and businesses do pay their debt voluntarily, about 80% on direct debit or cash installments. Really what we're looking at with bad debtors is the 20% that don't pay. And if you looked at that in the context of the BBC, for instance, we're talking about £200 million there. So about 5%, or approximately what equates to 50 million, is recovered through the use of attachment of earnings. So really the thorny issue for local authorities is that 15% where it's difficult to get money from debtors. The keys to unlocking that additional income, really. And I don't think as a sector anybody assumes 100% collection, but the general fund does expect 96.9% collection over 6 years. And just 3.1% of bad debt provision equates to approximately 31 million per tax year. So imagine what you could do with that. So that was a really, really on-point focused session. I also just want to pick up quickly one of the plenaries, Dennis. Sorry, not the plenaries, the breakouts. They are topics that go on during the plenaries that people can dip in and out of if they wish, and they're only available to people that are in person. And there's one that was led by Ian Morris. Now he's a clerk, a parish clerk, and he's a fellow at SLCC. And he talked about better working, monitoring officers and parish council clerks. And he examined how principal authority senior officers' attitudes towards local councils impact on the potential for collaborative innovation in localities. And he talked us through why this was relevant. Well, there are multiple drivers for more collaboration between local government tiers. There's ambition to deal with, quote, wicked social issues which require collaborative intervention between what he termed local actors. Local councils offer unrealised potential through uncapped taxation powers and the general power of competence. And existing sector guidance is too simplistic, he said. It's technocratic, and the issue and local councils sector generally is under-researched. And there's been some findings on what research there has been, and some recommendations, and that says that attitudes tend towards positive pragmatism, but they are highly contingent on past experiences and local context. Senior officers acknowledged an increasing need and importance of working well with local councils, but a lack of capacity to build effective networks to do so. And that the important element of trust had high levels of local variation linked to the perceived range of quality and proactiveness of the local councils in their localities. Further, that there's a need to revisit the intellectual and academic framework that's informed the training and professional development of the local government senior officer cohort in England, and the fact that we need a better intra-sector and inter-tier collaboration on training and support resources for senior officers in both tiers. And he concluded that there may well be a role for SLC, Solace, NALC and LGA branches, the local ones, to coordinate local networking opportunities for senior officers in local government tiers. And I'll be talking to Ian on a guest edition of the podcast in the next 2 weeks on micro devolution, which is an emerging area. So everyone should look out for that. Dennis.
Oh, that's interesting, Helen. I was sitting next to him during the plenary sessions, and he's from my area. He's in fact the town clerk to Spennymoor Town Council in County Durham, which I know very, very well. Yes, he had a lot of interesting things to say about the concept of devolution insofar as it's understood at parish and town council level. So I'll look forward to that. But for the moment, please spare a thought for those of our members who are either commercial or procurement lawyers, because one of the main changes to our law post-Brexit relates to procurement law, and the deadline for major changes is the 28th of October. So let's take a look at the very interesting conference session that took place on this. LLG Director John Purvis introduced a lineup of excellent speakers on the Procurement Act 2023. Rebecca Rees of Trowers and Hamlins, and Julie Lorraine, Deputy Chief Executive and 151 Officer at the London Borough of Tower Hamlets. Rebecca Rees opened and went through the key requirements of the new Act, how to prepare for it, and where attention should be addressed. And she explained how the legislation is part of transforming procurement government policy. The central idea being to encourage a wider and more diverse variety of bidders to come forward and take part in procurement processes compared with under EU law. But the scale and scope of the legislation, regulations and guidance is utterly formidable. 3 sets of regulations were passed in 2023 to 24 to underpin the Act ahead of the go-live date on the 28th of October this year. 17 of 48 guidance documents have so far been published, and Rebecca discussed whether and to what extent procurement practices are likely to change as a result of all of this. Will it open up the range of bidders, as has been suggested? Well, she says this is far from clear, but there are new procedures that practitioners will need to deal with. These include monitoring conflicts and making performance assessments during procurement processes, and these are entirely new, as are the new procedures for contract redactions to maintain bidders' confidential information. Now, Rebecca produced a useful implementation checklist that will be available from the LLG office. Well, this part of the session was practical, useful, and of immense value for procurement and commercial law practitioners. Next up came Julie Lorraine, and in this part, Julie took a look at procurement strategy. Do councils sometimes get this wrong? And should they embrace market engagement or discourage it? Well, from Julie's perspective, having been in the private sector, the answer was clear and unequivocal. Better engagement with suppliers and supply chains really does benefit your council. It assures better services and better value in her experience. Focus on price will simply not achieve any of these things. And Julie went into detail on how they do this at Tower Hamlets with a category-driven procurement model. Helen, this was fascinating and would be of immense interest to our members who do procurement work or are commercial lawyers. Helen.
Well, I think they've got their work cut out, procurement lawyers, because I think there's an awful lot to do before that October deadline. But they'll do it because we always do. Now, the conference day event aside, the evening for me was the highlight with the LLG Awards 2024. It's always exciting and moving at times to hear from winners and really appreciate all that the sector does in such challenging circumstances. So I'm going to dedicate some time here to those winners. Now, so there were 5 categories all in all, and we started with excellence in training. Now, this went to Warwickshire County Council for their diverse approach to encouraging all entrance routes into the profession, financial investment in growing the profession, development programs to encourage succession, and their work around equalities and social mobility. So huge congratulations to them, and also well done to Gloucestershire County Council, who got highly commended. Now, the Junior Lawyer of the Year is always a lovely award, and congratulations to Samuel Pitchford from Pembrokeshire County Council, a Welsh winner there, who triumphed for his work on the Celtic Freeport project, accelerated rollout of floating offshore wind energy, innovative approach to recovering owed funds, and glowing testimonials from his colleagues. So that was amazing. And a shout out to Nikenjo Okonta from London Borough of Hackney, who was highly commended. Now, the Legal Team of the Year, always prestigious, and that went to Brighton and Hove Council Legal Services for their outstanding work recovering costs for securing Grade 2 listed Royal Albion Hotel following a devastating fire there, actually, leading the Judicial Review Challenge against Home Office policy, and promoting wellbeing, inclusivity and talent retention within their authorities. And a well done for their highly commended to Stockport Metropolitan Borough Council legal team in that category. Now, Legal Professional of the Year went to Kath Whitehead from West Northamptonshire Council for establishing an in-house legal team. Again, she led on a judicial review case relating to a land sale and embedded wellbeing, equality, diversity, inclusion and learning and development initiatives throughout the local authority. So congratulations to her. And a well done to Alison Freeth from Warwickshire County Council, who was highly commended. Now, the last award of the evening, and you're no stranger to this award, Dennis, is the Significant Contribution to Local Government and Practice Award. And this went to Doreen Forrester Brown, who well deserved received the award for her lifetime commitment to local government law and practice, and her relentless advocating for the sector and for junior professionals and diversity, and just all round being a fabulous person, frankly. And it was also Doreen who really spearheaded a huge governance review, which revolutionized LLG's future and actually led to the appointment of a CEO and developed the organization into the one it is today. So we're very grateful to Doreen, and many congratulations to her as well. So this Friday sees the second part of the conference online, where we will be joined by new and familiar faces, including Mark Heath, Jonathan Gordon and Andrew Latham. I'm looking forward to that. And on that note, you can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 20, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. Bye now.